This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse. This is an exciting one because I also didn't tell you this off mic. You've been on the list for a while where I'm like, how am I going to ever get Clayne to come and talk about his experiences? So right time, right place. Here we are.
Yes.
Thank you for doing this. I don't
Thank you
think
for having me.
when we did the movie, I was doing the interviews. When we did Convergence, I was doing the interviews, but I didn't launch as a podcast till the following year. So I can't remember if we talked about it at all. I don't think we did. I don't think we did at all.
I don't even know if I was aware of podcasts when we worked on that film.
I know.
I
I don't
think
know if you were
completely
aware of
honest.
anything at that point other than what was happening during that film because you had a young baby at home. Were you driving to and from your farm to set?
That's part of the reason why I said yes to that film was that it was about a 4 hour drive,
Mhm.
5 hour drive from my place. And like what we were saying off show is that I was gone so much that year that I was willing to do anything just to stay near the house because I did have a brand new little guy at home. But yeah, I would drive back and forth every opportunity I had. But I love being on the road, so it's not a big deal.
I know, I remember you saying that, like just driving the truck back and forth. So
Right.
that's where I wanted to start is did you ever live in LA or New York? Like A Walk to Remember is the big first thing, but I couldn't find where that shot. So were you ever on coastal?
Yeah. So I moved to LA when I was 18 and I was there. And then about a year and a half after being in LA, I went to New York and I went back and forth. I was seeing someone that was working a lot in New York at the time. So we had two places. And when A Walk to Remember happened, which we shot that in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I booked that in LA. And then I went from that and I went back to New York, which was awesome, and shot Swim Fan up there. Literally, I left Wilmington and went there and then went to Australia for 6 months to do the Great Raid. And then I kicked around and did the LA thing until around 2009, 2010. And then I bought the farm and got out because I started having children.
Okay, so when I was doing this research, because for you to get A Walk to Remember and then Swim Fan, and then what was the one right after it that you just said too?
The Great Raid, that Miramax
Yes,
film.
all studio films. What were you just because at 18, the early 20s, I feel like you get every audition possible. Was this just a random audition that because it seems like you have a couple of co-stars, guest stars, and then all of a sudden now you're in the studio system. So I'm curious, you're auditioning or even what was happening at that point, because then you hit a different stride. Then you're in a different stratosphere of choice.
Um, it happened because you're right. When you're 19, 18, 19, you just get everything.
Mm.
And I did when I first moved to LA, I'd been there for literally a couple of weeks, and I booked like a co-star on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But I didn't really know how to act. I didn't take classes back in my hometown or anything. I never did theater in high school. I was an athlete. I went out there with the goal to learn how to act. I just didn't realize what I wasn't aware of is how expensive acting classes were living in Los Angeles. I was just a dumb hick from Alabama. So I wasn't aware of what I was really jumping into, which is great because I would have never attempted it. It would have been too terrifying. So I booked really quickly. I was like, oh, this is going to be a breeze, right? I'm so talented. And then I realized I didn't know what I was doing. And it was a really rough experience on that set. I was only in a couple of scenes, but again, it was just all so new. And then A Walk to Remember happened, I don't know, a year after that. And it was very similar. Adam Shankman was super sweet and taught me the ropes. But as you suggested, I got thrown into it and I didn't have a proper team. It's not like I could ask my parents to help guide me throughout this process. And my reps weren't very hands-on as it relates to nurturing me into the industry and helping me understand how to navigate set, how to navigate
Mhm.
press. I'm just a hillbilly who likes to drink beer and smoke cigarettes when I'm 20 years old and just going from job to job. But what was great is I was it was learning as I go. The Miramax job in Australia, I did that because John Dahl was attached. He was directing, and I loved Rounders, right? And I desperately wanted to work with this guy, and it had a really cool cast. And but it was rough. It was rough on all of us. Like one of the actors passed away in a motorcycle accident. He was decapitated on a motorcycle that was in front of us, and it was just really traumatic. And we were there for 6 months, and it was a really challenging shoot because it was World War II. They put us through one of those ridiculous boot camps for 2 weeks. And I just remember thinking, and then the movie came out and it had been destroyed. It had been chopped up, and it was actually sold in an acquisition with Disney. And the film never actually was properly seen. And I put so much of my life into it. And I'm 21 years old. So that 6 months it seems so much larger than time does now. And watching how Miramax just beat up John Dahl and then just threw the movie to the side, I was heartbroken. And it all happened so easy for me. I thought I could easily just walk away from it and then come back when I wanted to. So I walked away from the industry and stopped reading for anything studio related, stopped meeting on anything studio related. And I went down the indie route, and I felt it would give me an opportunity to play characters and not just be the smart ass teenager or whatever it was I was playing in these films.
Or a prop piece in a studio film. It truly, really, especially that time,
Right.
that age, that early 2000s, not that you're not insanely talented. You've got years. I've been on a set with you. But those that like 20 to 25 age range, they could put anybody in there. I have to
Anyone. Yeah.
anyone. And then, like you said, they can make you a great actor or they can destroy you in editing. They can make you a great director. They can destroy you in edit. There's so much I think actors sometimes don't realize how much is out of our control. You just want the job so bad. Then you get the job and then you realize, oh, you're just a conditioning system of capitalism, really, if not to, but it truly is that at the end of the day, right? So the studio system doesn't care about you at that time. What was the recovery process of watching one of your co-stars die? Did they have anything in process? Because I know SAG's starting to do some things now, but was there any type of, we're going to take a beat? Because how do you have concern about your safety moving forward? I don't know how you're able to use your full instrument.
I was 21, right? And we're talking 2001. So post 9/11, it all just happened. So the world was just in a place of uncertainty. So I think going into this war film, they put us through a very grueling boot camp, and by design, because these soldiers that were in this specific battle and this extraction had been in the jungle in the bush for quite some time, right in the Philippines. And these guys were very thin, so they put us. That's why we had to eat these rations and go through this process. Well, also we had to that we were constantly doing the choreography for this big extraction because they wanted to do these massive shots of us low crawling and going into this camp and extracting these POWs. So when the accident happened, we were leaving set one night, and he was a local actor out of Australia. So the Americans would get into a bus, and then the bus would take us because we were up in the outskirts, like in the bush of Queensland, up near Surfers Paradise, and it was about a 45-minute to an hour drive back to our condos. And we were leaving set, and we're pulling out of the parking lot, and Woody jumps on his bike. He takes off in front of us, and yeah, he was on the opposite side of the road, and a kangaroo jumped in front of him. It's so funny because you hear the word miracle, and it's these perfect timing, right? And it's everything aligning perfectly. This was the closest thing I'd ever seen to a miracle, and it was devastating. It was not a positive thing by any stretch. But he hit the kangaroo, which threw him ass over end, and the traffic goes the opposite direction, right? So he's in the air, and a car coming this way hit him. It threw his body maybe 100 yards. It felt like 100 yards up into the middle of the road. And his head was literally on the side next to a kangaroo that was dying. And the kangaroo's leg kept jarring back and forth. And it was just this extremely overwhelming. And also there was a little bit, I guess, you're a little desensitized, right? Because of what we do. We see really unusual things often, especially with gore and blood, depending on the project you're working on. And then watching 6 months earlier, I'd seen the Twin Towers fall from airplanes, which was so surreal as well. So we were all pretty devastated, but we didn't even know how to process the emotion, really. I certainly didn't. I just realized that I wasn't eating for a couple of days. And a friend of mine, Max Martini, his wife was with us, and he was working on film with us, and his wife said, you should try acupuncture, which I'd never heard of acupuncture. And it really helped me deal with a lot of the pain. But the problem was Miramax, these motherfuckers wanted to maintain this unit that they had created in the boot camp So they literally called us and said that they wanted us to gear up in our uniforms to go to the funeral.
What?
Oh,
Did
100%.
wow.
Oh, yeah.
I'm rendered a little speechless. That's why I focus a lot on the podcast too about recovery because I don't care how cheesy it sounds, but when you are using your body, your mind to go into a story, however horrific sometimes the stories are or the experiences are, there's not much training for the recovery of it. Whether you're paying a serial killer for a while, whether something like this insanity happens, or you're dealing with the business and they just do not care. So, how do you regulate your system to constantly not be a pawn, right, in somebody else's thing?
Mhm.
So, I don't, Clayne, I never knew this. I don't blame you for going into the independent film world after this experience at all. That's part of your recovery, I would assume, in trying to be a part of stories where it's fully collaborative. What I love about the independent film, it's like what we were just talking about off mic. You have a limited amount of time, money, people that are there want to be there. People are trying to make something work together versus throwing money at the problem or trying to get somebody else just to fill in and do another thing. Just go on to the next thing, go on to the next. I
Yeah.
Wow. So again, a pivot of a moment. So you go into independent filmmaking. At this point, are you auditioning for those things or are you taking meetings?
I was fortunate enough to be in a place to where the smaller projects were coming to us. So it allowed me to, but again, a lot of times I was saying no to what they were offering me, reading a script and finding a really cool character that allowed me to grow facial hair or change my appearance in some way, change my voice. And I didn't have that opportunity in the studio project. They wanted you show up and they cut your hair the way they want you to look. They kind of mold you into this. And I didn't have much input. And for me, I got into this industry because I thought it was designed to be a creative outlet. I saw myself as an artist. So choosing my clothing and my shoes and how I look is all my character's story, right? This is
Mhm.
who I am. And I just had very little input on that, right, early on. So these indie films, yeah, they gave me that opportunity and then getting to go to some of these larger festivals like Sundance, I then realized, oh, okay, this is my community. These
Yes.
are, as you said, we're not making any money to be here. So if I've flown all the way out here and I'm spending every night memorizing dialogue and putting my, as you suggest, putting my body through this, it's because we all love it. And that's what I really loved. And I was lucky enough to do that until Rectify came along. And when I read that and met with Ray McKinnon, it was the independent movie TV show. And I was like,
Yes.
oh, I can go make a little bit of money and still get to do what I love. And that kind of started pushing me back. It started to slowly push me back into the system a little bit.
Before we get there, because I think this is an invaluable thing, and a lot of actors write in and write about this. And I actually have this question myself because I'm half the time what comes to me is from auditions, the other half is meetings. Now you're meeting on projects. How do you handle those meetings? So, any of the meetings with the independent films, what kind of questions or how are you preparing for those meetings in order for it to be collaborative and for you to make the decision to ultimately come on board?
I do not prepare
Okay.
traditionally as it relates to what questions they may ask. And I don't want to sound corny, but we're
Mhm.
actors, so we are corny. I'm not a religious person, but I'm extremely spiritual. And I feel like you have to be to do this job. You have to be connected to spirit. Because again, I know it sounds silly, but stuff is flowing through you if you're doing it right. You're allowing things to you're almost just my buddies will never listen to this, so it's okay. You're like a vessel for
Yes. Yeah.
so for me, I always just try to get my heart and my mind and my body all aligned. I try to ground myself as much as possible. I believe that God is not the thing, but it's what's in us. It's what we're all a part of some original thing. And I feel like that the God that I'm a part of that lives in me. So I try to pray to that, to just be calm and to be focused and to be present and to be the best version of me. which is what I did before this podcast, right? I just
Mhm.
always, because your nerves get in the way of who we are. And it forces us to make decisions that, or to say things without thinking properly. And so I'm always just trying to put myself in a place to be present and similar to how I prepare for performing. And I just want to make sure that they're getting the true version of me. I never want to put something on. And then when I show up to set, who the fuck is this guy? So I try to let them see me. And I'm not good at being vulnerable. And in those meetings, I try to allow myself to be vulnerable to the questions that are being asked and to allow true honesty to come through of how I see it and want to approach it.
That's beautiful. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think sometimes when you show up to these meetings, especially if you want to participate in it, what kind of questions you're asking the director or the collaborators, what kind of ideas you're bringing forth. Because sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to seem too eager. Why not? If you want to participate in the
Oh,
project, like some people are like, what should I ask the director if I'm having this general meeting for this movie? What's your interest in doing the movie? What's your interest? I like researching the director, seeing what they've done before, but also
mhm.
I really, what I want to do with the character is kind of what I'd like to talk about and see if we're on the same page. Or even this last meeting that I had, we actually got onto the conversation of how we love a set to run. Like, how does a direct, it's
Yeah.
like a coach, right? As the director, they're your coach, right? How are they seeing it? What's their vision? What's your vision? How can we collaborate to bring it to the highest good? And sometimes people, I think, get caught up in, like you said, being vulnerable about what you want to do or how you see it, and not playing too cool. Or I don't want to act like I want it too much. It's such a weird sometimes position to start your or be
It's a
in.
tug of war.
It is. Yeah. So I
You
just was,
know, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, that was essentially it because your career, for you to be able to pivot, it's you taking on these meetings and you're pretty, now as sitting in the director seat too, you're doing some of these meetings, I'm sure, on the flip side.
Yeah, I also, I, as it relates to really wanting jobs, I think that was part of the reason why I moved away from Los Angeles. Is when I lived there, we're inundated every day with billboards and bus stops of things we're not in. We see it way before anyone else does, and we see a PR push that a majority of America doesn't really get to see. And the artwork is just surrounding you. And then every time you go out to a bar to go have a bite, you run into people and everybody's reading for this, and I just booked that. And I was constantly being reminded of what I wasn't in. And I'm highly competitive. So I was in a place when I was in LA in the beginning, I just wanted to book everything to beat other people. And I wasn't even focusing on like the job sometimes. So moving to my farm allowed me to have a life outside of the work. Because I think when I was in LA, it was the work is my life, or was my life fully. And here I'm quite busy just maintaining the property and my family and my children. And I started approaching those meetings different to where I genuinely wanted to make sure it fit because there's nothing worse than, as you were suggesting, how is a set ran? If it's not a safe place, trying to perform within that space is just awful.
It's awful. It's awful. And then it's your face that's being judged and not the bullshit that's happening on set. You don't get to have the ticker at the bottom being like, the director just lost his shit on me and walked me into set and said, because I've had this happen, yell at me all the way in and then be like, okay, it's your close up rolling. I'm like, and then I have to deliver. Nobody's watching that movie being like, wow, everybody got screamed at on set. And yet they still were able to make this piece of shit. I don't like that movie. And it tanked. And I'm happy that it did because the way it was run was so unprofessional, unsafe, egotistical, and then it fell apart. In some ways, that's okay. That's how it was run. So that's the equation to it. But a lot of times the equation is sometimes it's good. And then you have to go out and do press for something where the whole team wasn't working well together. And I love that we're actually having this conversation because a big part of our job when you sign on to something is in the extension of it is the press for it once you turn around and you're contracted to go out and speak on behalf of something that you've done. without look what's happening right now in the press, the Blake Lively and the Justin Baldoni, and everybody wants to weigh in on it. And no, only so many people were there. We don't need to go there, but I just find it really interesting that you don't get to learn this as an actor until you're already at that stage. You're already in it, right? And then it's really hard to turn around and ask somebody, wait, how do I handle this if it's being run like this, and then still be able to deliver so I don't get fired, so I don't, or maybe I do want to get fired. It's such a vital situation when a set is not from the top down being run with integrity and respect. I'll say it like that.
You're right. It is challenging.
It's so challenging. Okay, so Rectify. So Rectify comes, is that also a meeting that you got to have with?
Yes, I met, what was that? I think, oh, Libby and Junie had cast me in an Alan Ball series for HBO that didn't ever go. We shot a pilot with me and Ben Warshaw, and they called me. It's funny. I was doing a series called The Glades for A&E. And when we shot the pilot, it was an awesome character. And when they told me how it was going to go, I loved it. And then they shot the pilot, and then I find out they were doing 16 days of reshoots 3 months later. And I'm not in the reshoots. So I was like, oh, man, that's a good idea. Maybe it's okay that maybe my stuff worked, right? They completely changed the entire storyline. My character was basically going to be in prison the entire series. So all of my scenes were like through a glass on phone. And I hated it. I hated it so much. And I was begging them to write me off, and they wouldn't write me out. And all the while, I'm in Miami shooting this thing and flying back and forth to LA trying to get another gig, right? Taking meetings constantly. And the show hadn't aired yet, so no one knew that I was on it. And they cast me in the Alan Ball thing. I go back to the producers, beg them to get me out of it. They get me out of it. Not happy. I did not make any friends on that job. Go to the Alan Ball gig. It doesn't get picked up. So then my wife's, what are you doing? We have kids. So then Rectify 3 months later. So the universe, right? So 3 months later, Rectify calls, and I go meet with Ray McKinnon. And I'd met him when he was directing Crystal with Billy Bob. And it just clicked. I did have to read for AMC and Sundance. So I went to a reading. I read once, and then I booked the gig. And again, serendipitous that it shot in Atlanta, and it was a 2-hour drive from me from my farm. And it was 4 years of, bliss. I'll say this, instead of saying it was magical, it absolutely ruined me for the industry.
Look, the script for Rectify was so beautiful. What you guys did was so magical. That was a bubble. I'm glad it didn't shoot in LA. It's some of the best work I've seen. And it changed, I think, television in a very small way. People started realizing, oh, television doesn't have to be, we got that commercial break, you got to shove it down your throat, right? Like it was that pilot, it just breathed so beautifully. And we started to come into the world. So since it is called That One Audition, you learning on the job, what is your technique to auditioning? Even if you use Rectify or any of the other auditions that you've had, besides reading the script, since you like to develop the characters so much, what is the first few things that you start to do before you present what you are thinking about for the show?
My first step is just to understand what he's saying. And from what he's saying, I can start to build on why he's saying it. And then that starts to inform me of who this individual is. So I prepare for an audition the same way that I prepare for the job itself, which doesn't always work out because I'm not a performer necessarily. That's why Rectify was so nice, is it allowed us to sit there and be present and be grounded and to listen and respond. And it wasn't just cut, 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 In network, you get maybe 3 seconds, and then there's another cut. There's nothing plays longer than a couple of seconds. And Ray would just let scenes just completely play out. So yeah, I approach it that way. I go into the room. I'm never someone who has the page in my hand. I'm always off book because if I'm looking, then I'm acting. And if I'm acting, I'm awful. I'm not a good enough actor to just be able to put on a show. I'm the magician that has to trick himself. I have to be fucking shocked that I just pulled this handkerchief and then it just keeps coming, right? If I know it's in there, I don't do a very good job hiding it. I look like I'm acting. So yeah, off book, fully understanding who the guy is. And I do all the dumb stuff. Like I try to dress like the person. I'll go ahead and do the accent and I'll come in with the accent so that they don't hear the transition. I try to be the person so that out of everyone that came in that day, I'm trying to resonate that I'm the guy.
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
From scene study classes to audition classes,
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
that's why we created The Bridge for Actors.
A collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
To a working actor.
Now we're in that self-tape era. And now I'm just going to flip it on its head because now you're directing. So are you getting tapes now? And what are auditions looking like for you that you're viewing as a director? Like, what stands out to you? Are you at that process or are you just doing meetings for your films?
No, we do. We audition. I'll say this. I know in the first couple of seconds.
Everybody does. Is it because of a look, the essence that they're giving, or they're drawing you into something? I have my own opinions about this, and every actor tries to fight it too. They're like, why isn't casting watching my whole tape? Because you're not it. When we used to walk in the room, when we walked in the room, I could tell right away. I'd look at casting. I'm like, I'm not their choice. Just by the way, I walked in the room. All right, I'm just going to have a good time. I'll get out of here.
I definitely did not appreciate the room until after the room wasn't a thing. Walking in, I think I can read a room really well and I can play to the room really well. So I can feel it and sense it almost like being on stage. And I allow that to fuel me. The self-tapes are challenging. So again, I try to just be the guy. When I sit down and when I say, Clayne Crawford reading for Bruce Wayne, whatever it is, I try to make sure that I feel whoever that person is in that moment. So to answer your question about tapes, man, like for instance, I cast Sepideh Moffey in The Killing of Two Lovers. She played my wife, right? And I had a ton of tapes. She didn't even say anything. She reaches over to grab a glass of wine and then goes to say the line. And I was like, there she is. It was something about, so I don't even know and that's why, because my wife, when she's helped me sometimes, if I have to put something on tape, she's just like, I don't know what the fuck, why are we doing it again? That was great. I'm like, I have this much time for them to say yes or no. They don't give a crap what I'm doing in the third scene. It's right in those first couple of seconds till they hit click.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I got in a good debate with a well-known actor the other day that we did a tape together. 3 scenes. The strongest scene was the third one. And I said, I'm going to put the third one first for you to send to your agent. He was like, no, do it in order. I said, no, this is the scene that will get you the job. And they're not going to see it. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, they're not going to watch to that point because sorry, but this first scene's nothing. And if you do it out of order too, casting's going to be like, wait a second. But then they've got you, right? So put your best foot forward. 1, 2, yes, that 10-second, I don't even know if it's 10 seconds. There's an article going around right now where some casting director said, I watch a tape for 4 seconds, and now she's being persecuted for it. You know what? It's pretty true. So instead of being up in arms as an actor about it, do good work. And I also think, and I'm curious your thoughts as a director, if I know something in the first 4 seconds or 10 seconds is doing something for me, and they're not the right look, people will keep watching. I think it's something that's captivating, right? You're watching something and then ultimately you might be like, oh, okay, whatever, moving on. But it either makes you lean in and you found your person, or it makes you lean in and you store that person away for something else, or maybe they're great for something else. But I just don't think that there's massive science to this. You can't really put down a feeling. right?
You're so right. First of all, some of the best auditions I've ever had as it relates to feedback and going out and meeting directors back in the day was when I didn't have the sides in the right order accidentally because I'm an idiot. And I would do the scene and they were just like, this guy, that's not even in the right order. But you're right. It stuck with them. So there's a lot of value to that. And I love that you made the suggestion to move the scene. And look, we know when we read a script, I only get 15 pages.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not good, I know in 15, sometimes I can know on page 2 if the dialogue, and I'm like, okay, if you can't write good dialogue, that's the only part I'm saying. We're going to create all the other shit on the go, right? The blocking is going to be created in the moment. Art department's going to do their, none of it's the dialogue. And I know immediately if I'm going to continue reading a script. So I support the casting director who's like, I know right away, because I do.
Yeah, we all do. I know when I watch myself back for something where I'm like, okay, this clicks, or I tried too hard.
But also what you said is a lot of the jobs I've gotten were because I was reading for the lead and that goes to a movie star, but they're like, will you read it? Are you interested in this character? That was even my first job. I walked to remember I read for Shane's role. They're like, but you can be this guy.
Yes.
Same with the swim fan. They're like, no, you're not that, but will you play this guy? So it's always, I agree 100%. I literally read, because now we're in the world where it doesn't matter what the job is, unless it's an indie, but every studio job's reading again because no one's worked in the last 4 years. So everyone's willing to read. So now you're putting self-tapes up, and I'll even read for something that I know I'm not right for, just so that they're like, oh, but wait a minute. You know what?
Yes.
He would work really well in this character.
Okay. So then then I have to jump to Chad Powers, because you've gone on the record about Lethal Weapon, about why you didn't want to audition for it and why you didn't want to do it. And I'm going to leave Lethal Weapon right where it is, because I have to tell you, Clayne, you are 1 in a million to work with on set. You're incredible. Your integrity is amazing. And how you care so much about the end product is what makes you such a damn good actor and a damn good person to be around. So Chad Powers is,
I feel the same about you.
Even after we did the movie, I'm like, I was trying so hard to get on Rectify. I was up so many times for that because I was like, I want to go play in that world. It was right after I did True Detective, and I was like, that's where I resonate as well. You and I are kindred in that. The indie film market, the indie film studio, like television making, I just resonate with that so much more. So here comes Chad Powers. Will you walk us through you getting this job and your desire for what you saw on the page? So that brings us back to, and it's Apple, right? Yeah, Chad Powers is Apple.
Hulu.
Oh, Hulu. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. First of all, yes, I'm competitive, but I also love competition. I love watching competition. I've said before, I'd watch 2 rats fight over a Cheeto if I could distinguish one from the other. And college football, being from Alabama, there's nothing else down here. So when some of my guys called, when I heard Chad Powers, because I was aware of the sketch that Eli did, there's no way this is going to be any good. There's just I don't even know how you turn. And then they said Michael Waldron was attached. I was like, he's incredibly intelligent and a great writer. And I thought Loki was the best Disney show that they made. So I read it. So there's so many elements. So 1 is college football. 2, it was shooting in Atlanta. I can drive there. And then they're like, Steve Zahn is playing the head coach. Look, since watching Suburbia, like that guy I just love him in everything he does. And in Rescue Dawn, where he's the POW with Christian Bale, like I thought his dramatic work was just unbelievable. So the opportunity to work with Steve Zahn was very exciting. And then I read the script and it was great.
It's great.
And it was it's one of the only, it doesn't, rarely do you, and you can relate to this, rarely do you read something you're like, I'll watch this.
Yes.
This is something that I want to watch. Yeah, man. And it was just like this one scene, and they were like, do you want to meet? Because they're in the reading phases, and if you're going to meet, it'll be another couple of weeks, right? And I was like, what's the scene? So they sent me a couple of scenes, and I just picked one of them, and I did the scene. And I've never auditioned for comedy. So that was the other thing. This was this was new territory for me. So I'm like, I don't know if they're going to get that I can do this, because so often I'm in the Timmy Has Cancer movie, right? So I'm like, okay, let me give it a shot. And it was a great scene that was so textured. He was in such a bad place and so frustrated. And I love the Jack Lemmon style of comedy, right? Where it's just played completely honest, but just a little elevated. And that's where the humor is, right? When somebody's just...
Which scene was it? Which scene from the pilot was it?
It's when Perry comes in. She plays Steve's daughter, and she's an assistant coach, and she's coming in. First episode, we're talking about tryouts. And you got to understand, like, we're trying out our quarterback. This isn't a kicker, right? We're not trying out for punters. This is our freaking quarterback, and we play in the SEC, and we're having open tryouts. Things are not trending in the right direction for this team. So I felt like this guy was just over the top and completely frustrated and a little dramatic. So that's how I played it. And yeah, I got a call, I don't know, a month or two later, because it was a long process for them finding all the pieces. And I think it was a lot of trying to figure out Glenn's schedule as well. And then they called and they're like, hey, you want to go to Atlanta? And I was like, yes, please.
I cannot tell you how excited I am. And I think I can say this on the record. You guys are only doing 2 seasons, right? Because of Glenn's schedule. If it goes for a second season, which...
So what we've been told is we'll shoot season 2 and 3 back to back. And I don't want to say too much, but yeah, I think we only did 6 episodes. Okay. They're half hour. So it's going to be consumed quick. So they're going to try to space it out. We're going to try to align it with college football.
Are they going to do weekly? Because I just did a Hulu show and they dropped all episodes on the same day. And I swear it crushed us. It was also...
there's no way you could do that.
Yeah, we were a half-hour thriller comedy, and I thought it was really interesting that they dropped them all at once. It happened to be also right at the end of the strike, so we could do no promotion for it whatsoever. But it was this great... It's been the Get Out style, but Hulu made the decision to drop them all at once, and we couldn't... So I'm so glad. So Chad Powers is going to go week to week as far as...
That's what they're telling us. It'll go week to week. And again, they're trying to align it with the college football season. And then again, as I'm understanding, because we only go, so basically, from my understanding, the series as a whole will be over 1 season of football, because you can't go too much longer with this thing. Everybody's going to start to understand who he is and so forth as it relates to within the show. But yeah, I think that's the plan. And I don't know if we'll shoot more than 6, season 2 or 3. I don't know if they've made that decision.
I'm so excited. Do you guys have a date yet? Is it April? Or May? No, football's in the fall. Are they holding it to the fall?
August or September, yeah.
Okay. When you just there's Paradise out right now. I don't know if you watched that. Hulu's doing some great content right now, and they're making us wait for it. Okay, I need to ask a couple questions. How was it doing a comedy? How was it working with Steve? What did you take away from this experience? How does it feel doing comedy? I'll ask you that to have a quick switch in your career at this point.
Look, I've always thought I was pretty funny, right?
Looking around.
I always make my mom laugh. I know, make sure my kids know. They go like, "You're not funny." But I loved it so much. I love that there was never pressure on the day. It's all about the beats and timing. I love physicality. What Chaplin and Buster Keaton did, even Michael Richards in Seinfeld, and that entire cast of Seinfeld, the physical comedy is really important to me, the physicality. And I loved it. I loved it. Steve is the sweetest, most talented, everyone, man. It was just formed a really close bond, obviously, with Steve, because he lives in Kentucky. He has a farm. We both have cows and horses and goats and pigs and chickens and the whole thing. And not many people do that in our industry. And he's got kids that are growing up, and my kids are growing up. And so we were really kind of pals on the job. But I'll tell a quick story, and this would embarrass him, but just to give you a difference of how it affected me, right? Because when I show up to work, I come from a family of blue-collared, hardworking human beings who work their entire lives. If I get emotional, you have to edit it out.
Okay.
It's so ridiculous.
Not at all. Not at all. I don't think it is at all when you're talking about work ethic and you're talking about family and what it means to actually, it's
So they're
integrity.
hardworking. Yeah,
Hmm.
my
It's,
family's hardworking, and they work their whole lives and don't have a lot. So to do a job like this, it is such a gift. And I know I just never take it for granted. So to show up and everybody's there is having fun, and everyone appreciates that we could be shoveling shit, you know what I mean? Or roofing a house in the summertime. There's so many jobs out there that are so challenging, and these men and women that do them with no gratitude. There's no thank you, no pat on the ass. It's just this endless cycle. So what we get to do is new and it's adventurous, and we get to go to a new place and we see a city we haven't seen. And so anyway, I'm on this set, and Glenn, who has no reason to be a good guy, and not even that, I'm saying he's playing, this guy's there 4 hours before the show starts because he has to do these prosthetics.
yes.
So this guy's sitting in a chair at 4 a.m. while I'm still in bed, and I'm rolling in at 8 a.m. And this guy's like, morning. And we're on set one night and it's late, and we've been shooting all day long, and we're on this football field in Georgia, in this big, awesome stadium at Georgia State. And there's a guy on the ground who plays the backup quarterback. And we're trying to get this piece of coverage. And he's meant to be yelling something to Glenn's character as Chad Powers is running onto the field. And they're like, no, I like, and he's on like take 6 because they're just having him. And this kid is a funny little fucker, and he's throwing everything out there, right? And they just keep another take, and they're trying to get his eye lines right because he keeps moving his eye lines. Glenn, who again is just doing a million different things, instead comes running from off camera to get in a position so that this guy can look at his back.
Yep.
And when you have that type of leadership and you have those types of individuals on a set, everyone feels safe.
Yes.
It raises the bar as it relates to preparation, kindness, being willing to go with the flow, right? A lot of times you get an actor, they're like, hey, so we've had an issue. Can you shoot scene 17? I know we're on schedule for that for Thursday, but if you could shoot it today. And I've seen actors go, I'm not ready. I'm like, you're going to rehearse it 17 times before you shoot it. So you're going to be ready. But it's the ego, right?
Yes.
None of that existed on this gig. And it restored my faith in filmmaking on a higher scale.
You've had such a beautiful career. You've always been working. And I am so grateful. I really can't. I'm so excited to see you in the director's seat. So when are those films coming out? The one you're in pre-production for right now, right?
So we're doing a film right now that we're in pre-pro now. We start shooting in March, which usually we'll try to have it ready for Sundance submissions, and then all the festivals are right there in a row as it relates to get them submitted. And so because they're indies, when you go that route, you're looking at a 6 months to a year of post, and then you have the festival, which could be a year later. And then once you get a distribution deal, you're looking at another 6 months to a year. We shot Killing in 2018, and Neon released it in 2021. And then with Joseph Chambers, we shot that in the heart of COVID in 2021, and it didn't come out until 2023 on Paramount Plus. So it's a process. So right now I try to make the important things the important thing, and that's just putting together a good group. And then the next step will be telling a great story and trying to, as you suggest, create an environment where everyone feels heard. This is jazz, and everyone's voice matters, and it's what makes this collective piece of art. Yeah, it'll be to do that, and then we'll just take it one step at a time. And we'll be back. I'll be back shooting Powers in a few months, and I'll get to just be an actor, and I don't have to worry about
exactly right
and deal memos and what time people get to work.
We'll come back. Will you come back when the movie comes out? Because then I just want to do a whole segment just on directing. I would love that, to pick your brain about that for this.
I would love that. Yeah, thank you.
I adore you. Thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it. I love watching you work, and I'm so glad. I cannot wait for Chad Powers. Can't say it enough.
Look, you're awesome, and I just really appreciate you taking the time, and obviously I would love to come back.